G'day legends. Now, I hope you're all having a great day and a good end to the week. Now, today we're going to talk about how the Kremlin, which is Putin's residence, has been struck with 2 drones, and how a current UAV specialist has sent me some incredible information about this video. And this guy's actually done first-hand, real-life experience in drone warfare. I've also got some information getting cleared up about Bradley fighting vehicles working in amphibious capacity that we'll speak about, some general news, and of course we're going to go over the maps and have a look at how things are going. But firstly, I'd love you guys to help me out on something. I really do love interviewing soldiers and getting their perspectives on this war. And if you guys could point me in the right directions or get me in touch with more of these guys willing to talk to me, please let me know. My contact details are down below. And also, welcome to Willie vs. Google on the battle of my restrictions. So, I've been told that I'm restricted due to, here we go, strong profanity like the F word used in my thumbnails or titles, which, if you look on any of my stuff, is incorrect. And as well as this notification from the 23rd of March, which is when YouTube banned a lot of accounts. But I've been given this specifically, that on their community guidelines due to this war in Ukraine, content that exploits, dismisses or condones the war as is ineligible for monetization until further notice. This update is meant to clarify, in some cases expand, our guidance as it relates to the war. Now, I would not say that I exploit, dismiss or condone the war in any way, although I'd say many people are exploiting this war for their own benefit in many ways. Last night we saw this video come out here of the Kremlin here, but just take note of these 2 guys here with flashlights walking up the side of the Kremlin. Here we have the Russian flag on top, and here we see the drone flying in from left to right and either strikes the flagpole or explodes next to it. Now, in my opinion, I don't think it actually strikes. It looks here to me that it has travelled past and then explodes here. We can also see for the 9th of May, which is Victory Day for the Russians from World War II, we can see the parade set up here as well. And then we saw the subsequent fire burning on top here. These drones caused a fire at the Kremlin in the capital of Russia, Moscow, which is the residence of Russian President. Now, this has blown up the internet and flown everyone into hysteria about nuclear weapons, false flags, attempts on Putin, attempts on Zelensky, and it's absolutely out of hand. But on the surface, this does look like a Ukrainian drone attempt to take out the Russian leader. But is it that simple? Well, as with everything in this war, it's not that simple. Now, Kiev has denied any involvement in the attack, and Ukrainian presidential spokesman has told CNN, as President Zelensky has stated numerous times before, Ukraine uses all means at its disposal to free its own territory, not to attack others. The Kremlin press service has called the drone attack an attempt on the president's life and said that it was an act of terror. Ukrainian presidential advisor Mikhailo Podolyak has also denied Kiev had any involvement and has said, first of all, it absolutely does not solve any military goals, and it is very in the context of preparing our offensive actions. It definitely does not change anything at the battlefield. This would allow Russia to justify mass strikes on Ukrainian cities, civilians and infrastructure. Why would we need that? What's the logic? Russia, without a doubt, is very afraid of Ukraine starting an offensive on the front line and is trying to seize the initiative, distract the attention, and create distractions of catastrophic nature. So the Russian statements on such staged operations need to be taken as an attempt to create pretext for a large-scale attack in Ukraine. So this has been reported by the Kiev Independent, as well as Zelensky has said at a news conference in Finland at the summit of the Nordic country leaders. We don't attack or Moscow. We fight on our territory, defending our villages and cities. We don't even have enough weapons to do that. That's why we didn't attack. We'll leave it to the international tribunal. And today we've seen that Russia has struck Kherson, with Zelensky tweeting this, with some incredibly graphic images that are found on his Twitter. The world needs to know this. A railway station and a crossing, a house, a hardware store and a grocery supermarket, a gas station. Do you know what unites these places? The bloody trail of Russia leaves in its shells, killing civilians in Kherson and the Kherson region. As of now, 21 people have been killed, 48 wounded, all civilians, in one incomplete day in one region. My condolences to the family and friends of the victims. We will never forgive the culprits. We will defeat Russia, evil state, and hold all the perpetrators to account. Who is really behind this? Well, we don't know. Anyone who says they do know, they also don't know. But there are a few options. And I got this email this morning of someone who is very current and very knowledgeable on military drones and intelligence. So this email here. So it says, hey mate, I'm sure with all the madness going on, you're tracking this. I had a few things come to mind relating to the drone strikes. Number one, small drones. No way they can have been directed from Ukraine. Given the approximately 450 kilometre distance, the comms needed for that would be massive. The drones would require a line of sight or a repeater station to be used for a great distance. In context, the old Scan Eagle could operate in the TK Bowl fine, being the Tarin Kot, Afghanistan, but as soon as it had mountain in the way, the boys would deploy a spoke or a deployed ground station or fly higher and degrade the pretty average image quality even further. So when operating in the top of the Chora Valley, you are looking at no more than 30 kilometres. The drones look like your typical quadcopters. The explosive on board doesn't look to be too big and look to be a bit more incendiary in nature, so I'd assess like a Molotov cocktail or some type. What's interesting, the first one looks to deteriorate close to the flagpole. There's no damage to it after. If it was hit by the drone, you would expect to see at least leaning or not sheared off, like it almost doesn't hit the pole but goes off beside it. So possibly the operator had a command det arrangement on it. The second hits the dome and spreads fire out from there. Now we're going to have a look at this footage as well. Number three, the target was the Senate building and was struck at approximately 0230 hours. A couple of things stand out to this. Number one, the Senate Dome is visible during the May Day Victory Day Parade. Now, on the Sky News footage here, you can see the stands the parade already set up. So a big glaring reminder of how safe Moscow currently is, completely visible from Red Square. That footage that he discusses here is this footage, the same footage we discussed. These guys climbing up and we see these parades
Watch a grey disc
set up
speed
here.
in from the left and then an explosion right above the Kremlin. One of two drone attacks on Tuesday night, the Kremlin says. Here, a different view of an image for the history books.
So this was the second video we looked at here.
Of an image for the history books. Moscow blames Kyiv, saying this was an assassination.
Hitting at 0230 means less likely to have a building full of people. It's the same kind of methodology used by targeters to get around collateral damage estimations, CDE, when conducting deliberate strikes in Western forces. Do it at night time and the target is in a build-up area or school. You are less likely to have civilians in the area, which means less ramifications for women and children. Now, why the Senate building and flagpole? My assessment on this is likely the handiwork of an anti-Putin groups in Russia. Imagine the visuals of the flag actually catching fire. How does this make it look? Incapable of securing the airspace in Moscow. Now, the Sky News footage shows reactions from a couple of locals that didn't seem to even know about it. Both were older and less likely to be assessing social media, so I'm not really surprised. I wonder what the views of younger people would have been. Keep in mind too that the Lenin Mausoleum on the right beside the Senate building and also Red Square as well. So let's go back to this video here and we have this older gentleman here.
I haven't heard this information. If there was such an attempt, it doesn't sound good. I hope there'll be a response.
The first drone seems to come from the direction of this park. Whether it is launched from there or just flew over it, I can't tell. So overall, I think this is a psyop, never intended to injure Russian politicians, let alone. It shows the people of Russia how easily the heart of the Russian government can be touched. You sow that seed of doubt into the mind of everyday people around safety. This is also what I see in Bakhmut. Russia will not give up taking Bakhmut despite the costs of lives and equipment or the value of it strategically. How does Russia look if it can't take a small town of little significance? What does that do to the mind of Russian people? What does that have to do with the minds of the Ukrainian population? With all the resources, all the manpower, all the firepower used, they still haven't taken it. Seriously, look at the language used by Prigozhin. We have legally taken Bakhmut when standing atop the municipal administration building. It is very similar to the Soviet troops standing on top of the Reichstag in World War II and the mentality of, if I take the government building, I've conquered the city. Russia has to take Bakhmut, otherwise it looks weak and incapable. Given the failures of last year in the initial stage of the invasion, how does this make Putin look and his generals look? Touches on a few things there about interviewing people who are older in this, as well as the two drones. So this is the first of a few options we have. Either it was a Ukrainian drone, which he points out that smaller drones at this distance is very difficult without repeaters. It was anti-groups working in Russia, which we have seen happening before, or it is an inside job from the Kremlin to have plausible deniability, drum up more support for the future of this war. Now, it's well known that Russia loved to have an element of plausible deniability. And if you'd like to know more about the history of Russia's chemical, biological weapons and their use with this plausible deniability, I have a podcast here with two experts who have worked in the field for decades, and we talk for a few hours exactly on that. Now, the third option here, and personally I think maybe the most likely, is that it was a false flag event being run by Russia to target Russia to drum up more support. And we have seen this time and time again. Now, the ISW, their assessment is more along the lines of that false flag, saying Russia likely staged this attack to bring the war home to Russian domestic audience and set conditions for wider societal mobilization. Indicators suggest the strike was internally conducted and purposefully staged. Russian authorities have recently taken steps to increase Russian domestic air defense capabilities, including within Moscow itself, and is therefore extremely unlikely that two drones could have penetrated multiple layers of air defense and detonated or been shot down just over the heart of the Kremlin in a way that provided spectacular imagery caught nicely on camera. Geocode from 2023 shows that Russian authorities have been placing Panzer air defense systems near Moscow to create air defense circles around the city. A strike that avoided detection and destruction of air defense assets and succeeded in hitting a high-profile target as the Kremlin palace would be a significant embarrassment for Russia. Kremlin's immediate, coherent and coordinated response to the incident suggests the attack was internally prepared in such a way that its intended political effects outweigh its embarrassment. The Kremlin immediately accused Ukraine of conducting a terror attack, and the Russian officials' responses coalesced rapidly with this accusation. If the drone attack had not been internally staged, it would have been a surprise event. It is very unlikely the official Russian response would have been much more disorganized as the Russian officials scrambled to generate a coherent narrative. Now, Russia's ex-president Dmitry Medvedev has called for the elimination of Zelensky. After today's attack, there are no options left other than the physical elimination of Zelensky and his clique. Now, there's always been long-running speculation online that the Kremlin has promised not to kill Zelensky, and there are sources from both the New York Post and Reuters that state that has promised not to Zelensky. That said, I do believe if Russia did want to target Zelensky or Ukraine target Putin, that this could have been done multiple times, especially with Zelensky being in range of Russia's cruise missiles the entire time and spending a lot of time out in the open. So let's have a look at both these articles. So this is the one from Reuters on the 5th of February. Former Israeli leader says he received a pledge from Russian president saying, "Mold not Zelensky," as well as here being pulled out of the interview, which is fully online, between the ex-Israeli leader saying, I asked, "What is this? Are you planning to kill Zelensky?" He said, "I won't kill Zelensky. I'm not going to kill Zelensky," when asked about if he intended to kill Zelensky. And the Kremlin has previously denied Ukrainian claims that Russia intended to Zelensky. Ukrainian Foreign Minister Dmitry Kuleba has said, "Do not be fooled. He is an expert liar. Every time he has promised not to do something, it is exactly part of his plan." And in the beginning of the war, we heard a lot about Russian sabotage groups operating within Kiev to try and track down and kill Zelensky. But since those times, we haven't really seen any evidence of this, nor cruise missiles hitting places where Zelensky would be. US Secretary of State Antony Blinken has said, "I've seen the reports. I cannot validate them. We simply don't know. I will take anything coming out of the Kremlin with a large shaker of salt." So let's not stuff around and let's have a look at the maps here. So we don't have a deep state map, as deep state maps don't update on a Thursday. So of course, in the middle here, we have Ukraine, the capital of Kyiv here. The red areas with the red outline are areas occupied since 22, and the black outline since 2014, this being Crimea and Donetsk here. This is Romania, Poland, Belarus, and Russia around here. And where we're going to go is we're going to come down into Bakhmut. And I wish more maps had the feature of actually being able to roll through the days. I'm sure the ISW and the other maps have the information available, but why you can't do it, I'm not sure, because it makes it a lot more handy and a lot more popular to do. So we're just going to have a look at what I looked at yesterday as well. So if we get rid of this, so here we've got really 3 days of mapping. We just need to zoom in a little bit more on this one to line it up. So this was a few days ago, this was yesterday, and this is what we're looking at today. Now, what has changed? Now, the yellow as claim control has not changed between yesterday's map and today's, but what has changed is this assessed control moving right up here into this intersection here. So it's moved up to here, which is here on this map. Russia has been assessed in more regions in here. There isn't much more of a change, but we do know that every block here is fought with a lot of blood. As well as in Bakhmut, as always, we will compare this to a Russian sources map. So in here we have on the left the battle for Bakhmut from the Rybar sources that came out today. Now, what is this showing differently? So just a few things to have a look at. This is reservoir here, this reservoir here, where this road loops around with the one through it is this road that loops around with the one through it here. Now, what is showing different? So I've always said that the claimed control in this is seemingly similar to where Russia is saying that they're actually holding control. So the claimed control comes down this and to the corner of where this road comes up, to the corner here, down along here. So again, very similar to what they Western sources is saying that Russia is claiming to what they're saying is assessed on the Russian sources here. And also in the east, along this road, where this bends around to the right, which is this road here, where it turns off, which is right on this corner. They're saying they have complete control right down through here. And as we spoke of on the ISW just before this, yesterday we saw this red area was back to here. The dots came through here and has pushed up here, confirming some of this, as well as this control across this road here that is crossed here. It's essentially cutting off the supply lines through here and around. This MiG-17 statue has not been completely captured yet, but is in the claimed control and in the area of fighting, which is by the orange and red area here, as well as moving right up onto the road near Kromove here, this being the road of life, which the Ukraine did push back Russia in the area, but Russia has moved back up to this road. So they are taking back roads through here, although I do believe that this road is still open, but definitely under fire control of the Russian armed forces. Somewhere we do see a difference, and we have seen that the deep state does show very different to the ISW, and the deep state has shown some advancements here, is Mariinka. So if we have a look on the left here, we have the Rybar from Mariinka. Now these won't line up perfectly, but this is the main road coming through here, the main road here. There is a dog food factory that sits just within this region, which is just here. Now, we see where it crosses the water in here and turns out to the right. You can see straight away the differences here. The Western map is saying that Russia is back here and are not up through this intersection where Russia is claiming that they are further beyond this main road here and into the town blocks. And the footage of Mariinka shows that it is basically leveled just to rubble now. But the Western sources is showing an advancement on the north around this waterway here, and as well an advancement on the south out towards Poebeda, which is this road leads directly down into Vuhledar, which is why we've spoken about why Vuhledar and Mariinka are so important, is this main supply route through here. Russian sources have spoken a lot about why they're having so much problem getting this region, and as we see from here, there are a number of major roads leading directly into Mariinka and are able to supply the troops in this very effectively. What we haven't seen really much of is a push out around here to try and cut off this road, but if I was in this region, that is what I would be trying to do. But you can see that these maps are very different. Other than that, that is the only map update I have for you guys today. Now, yesterday I spoke about how there is serious doubt around the M2 Bradley's amphibious capabilities. Well, I received this email from someone similarly very knowledgeable on these vehicles, which seems to fit what I'm seeing about the loss of this amphibious capability. So this email here writes, there is some taken out of this to not give away exactly who this person is if someone were to go look back through documents. I am a retired Army NCO and spent half my career in this unit, and even served some time as a Bradley commander. Most of my time was a gunner. When I started training back in today, I was on the M2 Alpha Zero Bradley, which did have the swim barrier. It had the thinner armour and gun ports on the side and was light enough to swim. That's why you see the old picture of the Bradley swimming with the swim barrier up, as the photo I showed yesterday. I even got to ride on a swim in AIT training. When we got the newer Bradleys, they had the more familiar armour, now with the removed side gun ports, and they also removed the swim barrier. With the increased body armour, they could also no longer swim the Bradleys safely, and so they removed it completely. Now, I should say in this, I am unsure exactly which variant Ukraine did receive. Some are saying that it was the older variant, but I'm not completely sure, so I'll reply back to this and see if he can pull something up of images of these Bradleys and be able to tell me, which he does state here that I am free to ping him on any more Bradley questions. Now, Wagner Group leader Yevgeny Prigozhin, in an audio message, has said, I believe the advance of the Ukrainian army has already begun. We're seeing the greatest possible activity both on the perimeter and within the front lines. I therefore believe that it has already started, and I believe it will all enter an active phase in the very near future. It could be a matter of days. And this is the ISW's assessment of this. Wagner Group finances Yevgeny Prigozhin baselessly claimed on May 3 that the Ukrainian counteroffensive has already begun, likely in order to exploit information, space anxieties, and call for increased Russian military support for Wagner's Bakhmut offensive. Prigozhin has also claimed that Wagner's flanks currently held by conventional Russian airborne VDV troops are not in the best way, and stated that he will not speculate on how reliable they are to maintain politeness. The VDV, I haven't seen any actual physical evidence of them in place, but we did see that Russian MOD handed off the TOS-1 Alpha, being the thermobaric multiple launch rocket systems, to the VDV pretty much the day before, within 24 or 48 hours. Since then, we started seeing these thermobaric launchers being used within Bakhmut itself, who were apparently handed off to the VDV. So I would likely assume that they are in place on the flanks of Bakhmut and freeing up Wagner forces to be the stormtroops in the front line in the centre in Bakhmut as they entered this urban fighting phase. Prigozhin concluded that he anticipates a more active phase of the counteroffensive operations to begin in the next few days, likely using this claim to benefit the continued concerns in the Russian information space regarding a Ukrainian counteroffensive and the lobby for increased support for Wagner, amid a continued pleas for the Russian MOD to provide Wagner more ammunition for its offensive on Bakhmut. The ISW has observed no additional evidence to support Prigozhin's claims and does not assess that a Ukrainian counteroffensive has begun around Bakhmut. Now, my take on Yevgeny Prigozhin is he is a businessman first, and his business is war, much like our own military-industrial complexes. But I believe that he also has huge political ambitions, and to be seen having success in this war while Putin's army struggles is great optics for him in his circles. Now, he's constantly flippant on the situation in Bakhmut, whether he says that they're failing, whether they're succeeding. He's all over the place with how he reports this. But what I will say is that he has a better idea of exactly what is happening in Bakhmut than anyone else in the world, especially on the Russian side, with his own objective. Most people know Wagner Group from this war, but it is a massive group operating all around the world, significantly in Africa as well. Also, today, the US Department of Defense has announced a package to Ukraine worth $300 million. Now, the Pentagon press release says the United States will continue to work with its allies and partners to provide Ukraine with capabilities to meet its immediate battlefield needs and longer-term security assistance requirements. So, this is some of the equipment we are seeing here. So, there are additional ammunition for the HIMARS, which we'll talk about in a second. 155 howitzers, I'm guessing maybe the M777s, 155 artillery rounds, 120mm, 81mm, 60mm mortar rounds of the normal mortar sizes, tube-launched, optically tracked, wire-guided tow anti-tank missiles, seen used a lot, AT-4 Carl Gustav anti-armor weapon systems. Now, the Carl Gustav here, which is the 84mm system, which is a recoilless rifle, this is something that we've seen used a little bit, but we've seen more use of the NLAW. Now, both these systems are created by Saab. And now, most people might know Saab for cars, but Saab make some of the most deadly weapons in the world, particularly anti-armor systems. Now, my specific training in the military was anti-armor weapons, and we operated these Carl Gustavs and the 84mm recoilless rifles. And this is something that we haven't seen much. The thing with the NLAW, Javelin, things like that, is they're single use. Once that's used, it's done. It's done. Can't be reloaded. Where the Carl Gustav, you can just keep firing through that barrel, although there are problems with percussion to brains of people actually firing them. As well, so you're only meant to fire a couple of days, but in combat that doesn't matter. But they are a very deadly weapon. As well as Hydra 70 aircraft rockets, small arms ammunition, demolition munitions for obstacle clearing, spare parts, field equipment. And this Hydra 70, now Hydra 70 is not something very familiar with, which is a 70mm unguided air-to-ground rocket compatible with a variety of warheads, cumulative charge, fragmentation, and flat-shaped darts. Ukrainian forces already use a high-precision version of these rockets known as the APKWS, so I'll have a photo of that here. Now, speaking of HIMARS, we've had this video come out, in my belief, over the last couple of days, of Captain HIMARS, which I will say this video is pretty cool. So you can email Captain HIMARS here, apparently.
Я держу свое слово. Я не бью по располагам тех секторов, откуда я получаю координаты бронетехники из складов с БК. Тебе продолжают врать, что хаймарсов практически не осталось.
So something that has been, very divided amongst the pro-Ukrainian, pro-Russian side is that the pro-Russian side, they will claim that they have destroyed some HIMARS, but there is no evidence at all of destroyed HIMARS. But we do know that there are systems made up to look like HIMARS made out of wood, out of inflatable objects, things like this. But we haven't actually seen any evidence of a HIMARS taken down. And here we see this HIMARS backing into this shelter here.
Посмотри, в каких условиях мы храним на оттяжке хаймарсы. Это военные объекты, построенные еще в Советском Союзе.
So he's saying here that these facilities were built within the Soviet Union. And this tells me, just in my smooth brain, I'm like, well, wouldn't Russia have some access as to where that is. Even if Russia may know, I guess, that they may not be able to get this because he says here that they can withstand nuclear strikes. We see the HIMARS in the background here. But the HIMARS do need to come in and out to then, fire off their rockets. And, me being in Ukraine for a long time, I have multiple times have seen HIMARS. So it's an absolute credit to the crews operating these and the intelligence around them that none of these have been hit, because these are realistically one of the biggest target for Russia in the whole area of operations. As I said, no single HIMARS system has been destroyed.
И тогда смерть не обрушится на тебя с неба. В огонь!
So, in the end, he is saying, keep sending me target coordinates. A throwback to what he said in the beginning is that Captain HIMARS, here we go, I don't strike barracks in sectors from where I get my coordinates. So saying that if you send him the coordinates, that then death does not fall down from the skies upon you, telling the HIMARS system here in the background to then fire. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about if these rockets can be hit by S-400 systems or not. Now, from my research, what has been said about these air defense systems is the S-400, the radar system, can definitely see HIMARS rockets. The problem is it can't differentiate of what is a HIMARS rocket and what is something out of like a cheap Grad. Though it can't differentiate the difference between them and how they're fired. Now, that is just from information and speculation online. I'm not saying that is true at all, but we have seen claims that they are able to shoot down HIMARS rockets and claims that they have also done that before. But what we do know is none of these systems have been hit. And with his aid package, that more of these missile systems are on the way. And we know that the HIMARS system has made a name for itself in this, and a number of countries, Poland and Australia, have put in orders to buy HIMARS systems, although I think the Australian one is a little bit on the rocks currently. But what I will say is that none of us know how, where, or when this counteroffensive will take place. And we don't know the full extent of what Ukraine has been given in offensive capability. I think we will see some equipment that we didn't actually know Ukraine had. But what we're also unsure of is Russia's defensive strength. That said, if the offensive does go ahead, it will be a long, bloody, and potentially decisive battle for both sides. Although there are serious doubts being raised, YouTubers love to give their analysis on how these large-scale events will go down and where they'll take place and exactly how it will happen. And even I, who was a section commander, I'm absolutely not qualified to speak on movements larger than 8 men. That's where my training took place, up to that size of 8 guys on the front. And I know it's one of those things, the more you know, the less you realise that you know, that I would have no idea how to analyse movements of that scale. That's why I'll focus on smaller elements. The amount of pieces in this puzzle would be absolutely astonishing. So take everything I say or others say with a grain of salt, as it has to fit in their narrative, their agendas, and even with their advertisers and with policies, say on YouTube or within other news sites. People speak about offensives, or they'll just take this village and they'll just take out these vehicles, they'll just move the vehicles through here. This stuff is bloody hard. And anyone who's served in the combat corps will know anything that can go wrong will go wrong and will go wrong at the worst possible time. Movements on this scale are slow and difficult and rely on heavy logistics, and that supply logistics not being disrupted one bit. That's problems we saw in the initial stages of this war. We saw what happened when Russia tried to rush in on the first few days with their logistics cut off. We need to learn from mistakes made on the battlefield, as Russia is learning from their mistakes. But we need to realise these mistakes are learned through young men's spilled blood. Russia should have had more experience with operations like this from Syria, but obviously nowhere near this scale. But whichever side you're landing on, either pro-Russia, pro-Ukrainian, or pro-peace, my biggest suggestion is to not underestimate your enemy. Ukraine has millions of driven young people to fight and the whole Western world behind them defending their territory, while Russia has shown historically they are willing to pour men into problems until they find a solution. And we've seen improvements in Russia's strategy, especially in the air. Now, to dehumanize the enemy is a coping mechanism for those going through the trauma of battle, but it is a dangerous way to live your life if you're living in safety somewhere like Australia, especially if you're trying to see and analyse as unbiased as where this could actually go. Thank you for spending some time with me. I really appreciate it. Look after yourselves. If you'd like to support me, links down below, but never feel obliged. So thanks for your time again. Okay, bye-bye. Just as I was editing this video, which it's taken me forever to do, another intel update from the MOD of the United Kingdom has come out, saying on 3rd of May 2023, a fire broke out at the Russian fuel depot in Volna on the Russian mainland side of the Kerch Strait, close to the Crimean Bridge. It was initiated by a suspected drone strike. This follows a pattern of Russian fuel storage sites being damaged since the start of the war, with fuel depots in occupied Ukraine and the Russian-Ukraine border regions remaining particularly vulnerable to attack. The disruption to the fuel storage and distribution network will likely force adjustments to Russia's military refueling operations to mitigate targeting. Russian adjustments could include deploying additional protection measures at fuel storage sites as seen in Tospy in Russia, or relying on infrastructure in less threatened regions. Now, something we do know is Ukraine definitely does have the ability to strike inside Russia. What we don't know is how far in they can strike. So Russia has this somewhat of a safety band down the border. With Ukraine can definitely strike in Crimea, definitely strike in border regions, has done some deeper strikes. But with the Russian air defense, the further you go in, the more likely it is to be intercepted, as well as right now with the ruling that Ukrainian weapons that were given from the West can't be used within the Russian Federation borders. So any of these strikes are with older Soviet equipment or newer Ukrainian sourced equipment or built equipment, not with Western stuff. And I've talked a lot about this. This is one of the things, one of the big ones that I was in the Ukrainian government that I would be pushing for a change on, is to be able to use things like HIMARS or modern equipment within the Russian Federation to get rid of this sort of safety band here. Probably the furthest we've actually seen is when the Engels Air Force Base, which is home to most of Russia's strategic nuclear bombers, was hit by older Ukrainian drones from the Soviet era. So there's definitely capability there, but the option of more of it is unable currently, just as those drones are in limited numbers and no Western equipment can be used to strike across that border.